Welcome back to the Shine Within podcast. Karen Cheong is an international transformational speaker, writer, and healer renowned for her expertise in frequency work. With over 25 years of experience in personal development and spiritual exploration, Karen helps individuals release deep-seated distortion patterns, empowering them to embrace their inherent brilliance and connect to their true nature as infinite consciousness. A profound spiritual awakening included a complete ego death experience, enabled Karen to perceive and affect change at the vibrational level that underpins reality. Through her work, Karen guides clients to unlock their potential, co-create their realities, and live abundantly in the eternal now. I love that, the eternal now, right?
Yeah.
Be here now. It's so funny because I
Yeah.
actually have a tattoo on my side that says be here now. And I have to now
Really?
change it to internal, be here internally now.
That's
I
awesome that you have that on your side. That's amazing.
my one of my mentors actually had that on her somewhere on her body. I'm like, oh, I have to have that on mine because I love that because it's a reminder. It's a good
Yeah,
reminder.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so thank you so much for being on my show today. We'll just go ahead and pop and talk about frequency work basics. Can you actually just go ahead and explain what frequency work is and how it can actually transform someone's life?
Yeah. So I'm sure your listeners all know this already, but everything is vibrating. And so, scientists have been talking about this for decades. And really, the rate of vibration is the thing that determines the form of whatever it is that we're talking about. So if you take something really physical, like water, when the molecules vibrate fast, it's steam. When the molecular vibration of that slows down, it becomes liquid water. And when the molecular vibration of that slows down even more, it becomes solid, or density, or form, or ice. So if you take that idea and you extrapolate it all the way out to consciousness, consciousness vibrates at a rate that we can't measure yet with our physical tools, right? So when I say consciousness, I mean, you put whatever name you want on it. You can talk about it as the one, the oneness, the divine source, pure source, whatever you want to call that very highly resonating frequency from which everything comes and to which everything returns. So the oneness needs to have a different experience of itself. Okay, so if not, it would just be eternally one, forever, infinitely. But in order to have a different experience, there needs to be a drop in resonance. And when that resonance or vibrational level drops, it creates frequencies. And when that resonance or vibrational level slows down even more, it creates what you and I talk about as energy. And when that slows down even more, it creates physical form or matter. So the thing about frequency work is that it addresses the root of the issue. Because, we all run around thinking, if I do these things on the physical, do these mantras, say the thing, do the affirmations, journal, meditate, whatever, then we'll affect things on spirit level or the frequency level or the quantum. But it's not like that. It actually works the other way around. Whatever is the higher resonating order of vibration is what dictates what the lower vibrating order will show up as. So that's why when you hit what I call distortion patterns, or those things that you keep like smacking into over and over again, the reason you keep getting stuck is because you're hitting what I call distortion patterns at the level of frequency. And until you change things at the frequency level, which is where the root of the problem is, the physical can't reorganize. So essentially, frequency work is the release of distortion patterns at the level of frequency. And when you do that, the root of the issue dissolves. So let's just, for example, right? Like everyone has an area of their life where they get stuck, right? It doesn't matter how pulled together the person is, okay? It doesn't matter if their life looks like freaking amazing on the outside. There's always somewhere that they get stuck. And so, for example, for me, when I was way back in San Francisco, and my husband Chris and I had a real estate practice, and we did really well from the outside. We were one of the top 10 producers in the city. If you looked at our lives, it was spectacular. Lots of money in the bank, 90% referral rate. We only worked with people that we liked, had a great relationship. But yet, I always struggled with feeling like I didn't have enough. And so I just drove my team crazy and my husband crazy because we worked together, because I was just like, we need to have more. And he'd be like, babe, if you look at the bank account, we're like really good. But like every night Gina. Like every night I would spreadsheet like how many months we had before we had to sell the house and move in with my parents. You know?
Oh.
So I was like, something is really, really wrong because clearly I am not experiencing abundance. I'm like in scarcity, even though my reality isn't really like that. Does that make sense? Like if you look at
Yeah.
the bank account, we're fine. So it was only when I started to release my distortion patterns around scarcity and non-worthiness and a whole bunch of other stuff that really weirdly, it just became my new normal. I didn't have that scarcity pattern anymore. And I didn't even notice this. But one night, a few weeks after I'd started frequency work, my husband, Chris, said to me, "Have you noticed that you're not spreadsheeting anymore?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, you're right. I haven't. I haven't been doing it." So that's the thing. Frequency work actually really addresses the root of the issue. And not only did I change in terms of how I felt about scarcity, but then I started to be able to enjoy the abundance that we had even more. And then abundance started to grow in terms of our physical experience of it as well. So everything reorganizes around things that happen at the frequency level.
Wow, thank you so much for explaining that. Now, how do we get rid of those distortion patterns, right?
Yeah.
How do how do we get rid of
How do
those?
we get rid of those things? What a great question. I wanted to know too, right? I was like, okay, what do I got to do here? Right? All right. And this is just just for everyone to understand. It's not like when I started this, if you told me even like 6 years ago I would be doing this, I would have thought you were nuts, right? I didn't start frequency work being like, gee, on my top 10 list of things to achieve, I'd like to be able to give it, right? Like, that's not like, I was just like, can we just please make the spreadsheeting stop, right? Okay, that was like the end outcome. And so the thing about this time, and I'm going to answer your question, so I'm not avoiding it. So I'll bottom line it for you. This time is an incredible opportunity because consciousness is rising. And because consciousness is rising so fast at this time, what we are able to do and the level of vibration that we are able to work at has changed, which is what makes frequency work possible. So, meaning you need somebody who is resonating high enough, who can perceive at the level of frequency to be able to delete those distortion patterns. And once that happens, your life reorganizes around it. It's really quite spectacular because just to make this also super really clear, I'm not like some like weird guru dressed in white, waving my little magic guru wand over you. Okay, that's not what's happening here. I may help you and I may guide you and I give you tools to help yourself, but really it's up to you to raise your own frequency resonance. It is your journey. You have free will. It's really about using the tools available to you to raise your resonance. So I realize that this may sound kind of crazy, but the way you release your distortion patterns is really like a three-step process. One, to listen to what I call a group frequency calibration, which is going to sound a lot like a guided meditation, where I'm essentially working at the level of the field to release distortions. Okay, so that's number one. Listen. And also, by the way, you don't have to like sit there inert on a cushion counting your breaths whilst I talk to you, right? You can walk your dogs, you can be working out, you can be whatever. Just listen to it. All
Right.
right. Please don't drive though, because I mean, I don't want you to get into any kind of chaos or cause any havoc to anyone else. So number one, listen to the group frequency calibration. Number two, be aware of the distortion patterns that show up for you, right? So, you have to kind of be aware of the stuff running in you, if not, how are you going to release it? Like if you're totally like completely not willing to look at yourself and what it is that you're running, really difficult to change, right? So number two, self-awareness. Number three is then to what I call confirm the removal of the pattern. So here's the thing. We are incredibly powerful co-creators. We just are. So we don't realize that we are constantly co-creating. Now, we're either doing it intentionally or we're doing it unconsciously. The clearer and higher your frequency resonance, the more you release your distortion patterns, the clearer and higher your frequency resonance is. That's what allows you to manifest faster. Because a lot of people, when they talk about manifestation, they think, okay, well, I'm just going to manifest this thing and the universe is going to give it back to me. And I'm just going to focus on this method. And everyone focuses like on what's the method that I need to use in order to manifest. Here's the thing. The method is like less than 2% of the gig. you presume or you assume that you're this beautiful, clear frequency or this clear signal broadcasting out to the universe what it is you want. But that's not the reality. The reality is here you are, you start the broadcast, and then there's all this static, right? So it's like, and that's what the universe hears. And then it returns that to you, and you're like, I don't think I wanted that, you know?
Yeah.
But that static is all the distortion patterns. So when you clear your distortion patterns, not only does your frequency resonance rise, but your field gets clearer. So what it is that you get to manifest, what it is that you get to experience is of a higher resonating order.
Yes, I've been experiencing a lot of manifestations, things that I was thinking about a while ago. And then all of a sudden, not a while ago, I should say, like recently, and then boom, it's there. I'm like, whoa, but I'm not
Yeah.
ready for this. It was like a dream of mine in the future, but I'm not ready for this. Why is this being presented to
Yeah.
me?
Probably to show you like what you need to clear up so that you can live it, I imagine.
And yeah, sometimes I'm like, wait a minute, this is going too fast
Too
for me.
fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk about the self versus the self.
Yeah.
So you talk about
Yeah.
the little s self and then the big S self,
Yeah.
which is the bigger us, right? What's the
Yeah.
distinction and why is it so essential for self-awareness and empowerment?
Yeah. So, when we're running around, most of us, like, before we begin the spiritual journey or just as we start, we tell ourselves a lot of stuff. Like we have all these thoughts and we have all these emotions and it seems really loud and we think like those thoughts are us. You know what I mean? Like, or
Mhm.
that we are those thoughts, right? We just think, okay, they're really loud. That must be who I am. But they're not. And so that's the perspective of the ego mind or the little s self, the you that's always comparing you to something else. That is a function, part of the function of your mind is to compare, right? Is this safe or not safe? Is this good or not good? How am I measuring up to this person? You know what I mean? Like, are they better? Are they worse? How do I stack up? All that stuff. So that's part of your mind's function. The little s self perspective really is centered in the ego mind and is very, very mired in the illusion of separateness. Right? So you probably know all this already, but it's that perspective where it's judgmental, it is limited. It's like the perspective where it's like I need to have more for me because it's me versus them. Does that make sense?
Mm.
So it's a very limited perspective of the ego mind. But the thing is, we're also not only the little s self, we're what I call the big S self, or the aspect of you that is infinite, indestructible consciousness. Okay? That aspect of you that recognizes and fully is 100% aware that it is intrinsically part of the oneness. You always have been, and you always will be. We've just forgotten. And so, the thing is, when you start to connect to the big S self, which has to do with clearing those distortions that keep you mired in like the perspective, like the little sort of blindered view of the world, when you start to come into that perspective of the big S self, it's funny, like things that used to like take a lot of your attention and trigger you don't matter as much. What you used to think is important isn't as important to you because your perspective is so much greater. You have so much more of a feeling of yourself as part of the oneness. And you start to recognize that you yourself are so important because without you, the oneness wouldn't be complete, right? So the thing is, the big S self perspective really can help us in a time when there's so much polarity. When there's so much negativity, where it's so easy for us to beat ourselves up or go into despair or to feel anxious, right? It's so easy right now to fall into that. But when you have the big S self perspective, what happens is you start to not only rise in your resonance, but you recognize that you are infinitely connected to the one and that you are beloved exactly as you are. Now, am I saying that you're going to feel this way like 24/7, you're going to be blissed out on like, unicorns and rainbows all the time? No, right? But the more clear you become, the higher in your resonance, the more that perspective comes in. And you're like, oh, okay, things are more possible than I thought because that perspective is limitless. It recognizes and remembers that you have access to the limitless. that you have access to abundance, that you can infinitely co-create. But we forget that aspect. And a lot of people might ask, well, that's really nice, but I don't even know what that you're talking about. So I've never experienced that. I don't know how I'm going to experience that. But you have experienced your big ass self. You just don't realize it. So if you've ever been like, out camping or something like this, and you look up at a beautiful starlit sky and you
Mm.
feel your heart like expand with like gratitude for life, for your existence, for like the earth, or if you have that same feeling when you're looking out on the ocean, whatever, you're starting to experience yourself as big as self. You just don't recognize that that's what you're doing. So it's very possible. You're just cultivating that perspective.
Yeah, I love that how you explain that, and it reminds me of how I had to die to my old self, the
Hmm.
the Gina that was drinking, the Gina that was destructive and reckless and everything, and then I finally surrendered
Yeah.
to the divine, and I had to ask for help because I was so stuck in my ego. Like,
Yeah.
I got this, I can do this on my own. I couldn't do it on my own. So that's when
Yeah.
everything changes, when I was connected to the divine.
Yeah.
And then I remember I was crying outside a familiar liquor store, and I was just like, why am I living like this? I had that despair,
Yeah.
worthless shame, all of it,
Yeah.
guilt. And then I said, I need help. And then I wound up in the hospital 2 weeks later. And then I was like, what is going on? But it was a
Wow.
blessing. It was a blessing in disguise that I had pancreatitis, detox there in the hospital. And I spent that time
Wow.
with myself, and
Yeah.
I connected to the higher consciousness, called, I guess, Christ consciousness. And
Yeah.
then it was so beautiful. And then that's finally, after I left the hospital, miracle happened. I just was not interested in drinking anymore. I'm like, that's it.
Yeah.
This is it.
Yeah.
This is the time. And so yeah, that whole big self, little self makes total sense to me. Thanks
Yeah.
for sharing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
That's
you're welcome.
awesome.
And the wonderful thing about your story is like we think that we're just this version of ourselves, like the you that was outside that liquor store. You're like, this is the way my life has been. This is the way it's always going to be. But the thing is, as you rise in resonance, you click into a higher resonating version of you. You literally just changed timelines. You moved from one timeline when you were this version of yourself at this resonance with this kind of future, this kind of potential. And you literally, because your resonance rose because of what you did in this hospital and you rose in your resonance, you literally clicked into another timeline and here you are, this more magnificent version of yourself that exists. There are infinite versions of ourselves out in the field, infinite versions. And because your resonance rose, you were able to access a higher level one. And thank God, because here you are sharing your gift with everybody. So that's amazing. Yeah.
Oh, it's so much better on the other side. Oh, yes. Oh my goodness. But I wanted to go ahead and talk a little bit about your journey to frequency work. Can you just go
Mhm.
ahead and share more about your personal journey from your health crisis to your ego death experience and how it led you to your ability to work at a frequency level?
Yeah. Well, I'm laughing, Gina, because I went to law school.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome.
So I'm trained as an attorney. So the fact that like I do this now is like really hilarious, like
I
the
love
universe has a
it.
great sense of humor. So for me, what happened was, a lot of people start in their spiritual journey with some kind of crisis, right? And all of ours looks different. For me, it was a health crisis. So what happened was I ended up getting, if you've ever had like a mosquito bite on like a knuckle or on the
Oh,
back of your knee
yes.
and it totally drives you
Yes.
nuts. Well, imagine that from like underneath your chin all the way down to your ankles. And that's what I
Yes.
had. And I couldn't sleep. And after a few weeks of this, actually a couple months of this, I'd gotten to the point where I was a really hot mess. I was becoming suicidal because I wasn't sleeping and I didn't know that I could sustain. Like I was just like, I'm not strong enough to do this. And so anyhow, how fast forward, my husband's like, okay, we need to have you quit your job. You're going to go see the acupuncturist that your aunt knows about across the country in Canada, and he's going to help you. And what happened was, and by the way, it wasn't like we were living in New York City at the time. It wasn't like I was just lying there being helpless. I mean, I was going to see all these different therapists and I was going to see doctors and it wasn't helping. So anyway, fast forward, go see this man, and within 5 weeks, of just using needles and cups, I came out looking pretty much like I do now, and in the sense of like clear skin, totally different person. And my question was, What is there in the unseen that forms the seen? What is there? Because this was like a miracle, right? And not
Mm.
only did I physically get better, but I was like a totally different person, just kind of less extreme than what you experienced, really, but kind of similar. I was just like, how is this possible? And that led to a 25 plus year search of seeking, trying to find the answer of I'm not sure what. But what happened is that I went experienced. Sorry, I'm just going to pause for a second, Gina.
Yeah, yeah.
Just go out. I don't want to cough in the recording. Sorry. Just, I
Oh, good.
was like trying to control it. It wasn't happening. Thank you. Sorry.
No problem.
Okay. So anyway, fast forward to when we are in San Francisco. Here we are in this beautiful life that I was telling you about, looked amazing. And yet here I was still in this pattern of scarcity. And I'd been doing all these different kinds of modalities, right? I'd done all the personal development stuff. I'd explored spirituality and weird energetic modalities and all kinds of stuff. And I was implementing because I'm like that kind of person. I'm like, is this going to work? Is it just like completely woo woo? Like, let's just see what happens, right? So I would implement all this stuff, and some of it worked better than others. But still, I had that experience of scarcity. And not only that, but when I looked around at our colleagues, even though we were doing really well, I was like, this is really strange. Like, it seems like for the people who are doing better than us, are doing less than us for our clients. They seem to care less, and yet they're outproducing us. What am I missing here? With all my different modalities, what's going on? And it's funny how the universe answers your question. I'm like, what am I missing? Where am I getting stuck? Like, what's the thing? And literally, I came back from a trip to France, and I was in my acupuncturist's office, and I remember this so clearly. I got off the table and she said to me, have you ever heard of frequency work? And Gina, it was like, that scene in The Matrix, when like the bullets go flying
Oh,
past cannon,
yeah. I love
right? It's
that
like,
scene.
Whoa. I know, right? It's like totally epic. But like time slows down and the bullets go by him. Okay, well, mine wasn't that epic. But I do remember seeing like every single, it was like centimeter by centimeter. I could see all the edges of the room and like time slowed down. And I said to her, no, I've never heard of frequency work, but I need to. I need to know what it is. And so, like I said, I didn't start frequency work like with any outcome other than to stop feeling crappy about the fact that I didn't feel like I had enough. I mean, that's really what it was. And I just did it intensively for 2 years. And all one day I happened to go to this retreat in Sedona. And well, you know kind of what it's like, right? So we are small business owners. I've cleared my calendar for this retreat, which is a 12-day retreat, which is like, if you were a small business owner, that is a crap ton of time. All right.
A year's worth.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I've like delegated, I've organized, and you got to do all the stuff, right, to get ready. All right. So I go, so I'm having all of this resistance, and I'm like, okay, I've done enough inner work to know when the resistance shows up, okay, it's a kind of a good sign, like something big's about to change. So even though I had the resistance, I went. And it was weird because I went to this workshop, and as soon as I walked in the room, I was like, this is an unstable field. I can just feel it. It feels weird. And what the teacher, who I'd never heard of before, I just knew I had to go to this retreat, was purporting to do was he was going to have us pierce the veil of the absolute, pierce into the oneness. But I was like, we're not going to be able to do it. Like this field is like way too wobbly. And I didn't have my abilities. I just had a good intuition. So anyway, I did something which is totally unlike my culture. So I am of Chinese descent. I have just thrown down thousands of dollars for this retreat. I have cleared my calendar for 12 days. So in my culture, what that would mean is I would sit there, take notes, and then implement, right? Because that's what I've been programmed to do. I mean, you don't waste money, right?
Right, right, right.
So anyway, so I'm sitting there and I'm like, I should not be here. And so, Gina, I did something which is like I've never been done before. I walked out of that retreat and I was like, I'm here to meditate for 12 days on my own, and I don't know what I'm going to do. So the next day or 2 days later, I go into meditation. So please know, I did not like have any outcome. I was just like, I'm going to try to do what this guy says he's going to do in this retreat. I'm going to see if I can pierce the veil of the absolute, like move through the veil of forgetting into the oneness. So it was early in the morning. I'm sitting in this little studio apartment in Sedona, right? I close my eyes and I just start to raise my frequency resonance. And I did not plan for this, but in that meditation, what happened was there was like an ego death where I had to get to a point where I was willing to release Karen, like the identity of Karen. And it was terrifying. Okay, that might sound like delightful. It wasn't delightful for me. It was freaking terrifying because I
Hmm.
was like, well, what happens? Am I going to lose my mind? Do I lose all my relationships? What happens? And ultimately, Gina, for me, I was just like, I don't care what happens. I just know that I have to surrender here. It's like it took me to my knees. I was just like, I was like, if I just know that if I want to pass the ceiling that I keep bumping into etherically, I have to surrender who I think I am. And then I did. And then what happened was my resonance just went, it literally felt like I was going like this, whoop. And
Wow.
then all of a sudden I was in the oneness and there was no me. And I literally, in that moment, started to I started to cry because I couldn't believe that I'd forgotten that I was part of the oneness. And so I cried for like, I don't know, a few minutes. And then I laughed because I was like, I can't believe that I've forgotten that I'm part of the oneness. So I'm sure if anyone had looked in the window of this tiny studio apartment, they would have thought this woman was totally bananas. But for me, it was such a like intense experience because I was like, how do you forget that like your hand is attached to your body? It was kind of, but more profound.
Hmm.
And then I perceived everything as frequencies, and I recognized that somehow I could change them, like work at that level. And then when I came out of that meditation, it was dark, and I was like, what? What's happened? And I looked at the clock, and it had been 9 hours.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't realize, I mean, it wasn't like I was planning to go in there for 9 hours. And after that, so I'm in Sedona, right? So I'm like hiking around. And it's beautiful there. And as I'm there, I literally am perceiving the illusion. I'm like, that is spectacular. It's like I'm stoned, but I've not ingested a thing, right?
Right,
Like
right.
it's like the Matrix. Like, when he sticks his hand through the little
Oh,
mirror or
yeah.
whatever, goes, bleh. It's like that. But it's the reality. And I recognize that, wait a minute, the illusion is really there for us. It's a gift for us to grow from us, for us to like remember who we are, that we are infinite, indestructible consciousness having a human experience. And we truly are part of the one. Like to remember that, like not as a thought, but like as a visceral feeling. And what was weird was, so I'm having this profound experience, and a woman who I hadn't seen in like literally 6 years says we connected briefly, and she's like, "Hey, I'm going to be in Sedona," and we happened to overlap literally for 12 hours. 12 hours. She comes to see me at my little studio apartment after this hike, where I'm like looking at the illusion. She's talking away, and I'm like, she's telling me about some problem she's having, and I'm like literally seeing like the source, like I'm seeing on frequency level, I'm seeing her patterns, and I'm like, do you want help with that? And she's like, she kind of looked at me funny, and she was like, sure. And I said, okay. So I just worked on her, like just like I wasn't thinking, I just helped her. And then she started telling her friends, apparently, and they started calling me for sessions. Like, Gina, I was like, whoa, what is happening? And that's how it began. I didn't plan it. It just found me.
Wow, that's beautiful. Yes. Have you ever heard
Thank
of the
you.
Healy device? Some
Yes,
Yes,
I
what are your
have heard of
thoughts
the
on
Healy.
that? People have talked about that, and I don't have one, but
Mhm.
what I use is my cell phone on YouTube. I'll go ahead and play like certain hertz, depending on
Yeah,
what I want to feel.
yeah,
And like sometimes I have a lot of body pain from my
yeah.
car accidents in the past and just reckless
Wow.
behavior, and just my spine is all messed up. And
Yeah,
so when I'm really hurting, I'll go ahead and put on some frequency hertz
yeah,
that are for the body pain. And I do feel better. I feel like things
yeah,
are moving now. And that's just with
yeah.
my cell phone. So I was just curious if you heard of the Healy and what your thoughts were.
Yeah, I have. I've never used it myself, but here's the thing. Frequencies, I mean, even sound healing is helpful, right? Like a lot of people will have healing or clearing from like sound healing, right? Whether it's singing bowls or gongs or whatever. So that is vibration at the level of the physical. That's why your phone thing works, right? That's why people can go into meditation more deeply when they're listening to like binaural beats or whatever the thing is, right? That helps your mind go into from beta, like, this very high frequency, like resonance, into like theta, which is like slower, right? And so that all is super helpful. And it's still physical, right? It's still at like if you can perceive it with your senses, meaning like you can hear it or you can see it, it's at a vibrational level that's quite low because you can see it physically or you can hear it physically. What's amazing about consciousness now is when you work at the level of the quantum or you work at frequency level, you can't really perceive it with your senses, right? Because it's vibrating much higher. So I've never encountered the Healy, but anything that's made physically is still limited by the physical, right?
Mm.
So I'm not saying it doesn't work, and I'm not saying it's not helpful because I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Um, yeah, but what I would say is there's the physical stuff, which is helped by all that stuff. Because I always think, a multidisciplinary approach is helpful, right? So if like the sound healing helps you, plus something else, do it. You know what I mean? Like do what works.
What works for
So
you,
that's
yeah.
the thing. Yeah, if it works for you, great. And so the thing about frequency work is as your distortions clarify, things just work better, right? So let's just say you're doing frequency work and sound healing and like emotional freedom technique. All of those things are going to work better because you're addressing it at all the different levels. Make sense? Because you're
Mhm.
addressing it at the level of the quantum at which the root cause happens. And then you're addressing it in the physical. So it just speeds everything up. So I feel like if you find things that really work for you, and I always, for, my clients and stuff like that, it's not just frequency work. There are other modalities that can help too that dovetail really wonderfully together. And I feel like we're finally in a space where, excuse me, we're finally in a space where consciousness is high enough. It's about collaboration, right? It's like, don't you want like things that help each other to be better? Right? Don't we want to help each other rise? So my thing is like, man, if you can find modalities that help each other, fantastic. And the wonderful thing about frequency work is that it makes everything faster and more efficient, whether it's coaching, whether it's, I don't know, whether it's the body code technique, whether it's neuroemotional reprogramming, whatever. It doesn't matter. The thing is, frequency work, because it helps your frequency resonance to rise, makes all that stuff faster. And the funny thing is, we're so causal as humans. We think, okay, if we do this and then this happens, then it's worked. But the thing about frequency resonance is when your frequency resonance rises, magic starts to happen. That's when the nonlinear magic of the universe comes in, right? So that's like, I have so many stories in our inbox of like, I came to you for X, Y, and Z, and I didn't necessarily feel better right away. But literally, within 3 days of having my session, this person referred this chiropractor who does this very specific thing that's specifically for me. I went to see him, pain gone, right? Things like that. Right? Very specific stuff comes in. So whether it's direct or indirect, like frequency work is just really awesome because it just helps everything become more smooth, more effective, more efficient, clearer and faster.
That's so beautiful. Do you actually, or can you even share a story or example of a client who actually experienced the significant transformation of frequency work?
Yeah, I have tons of them. So let me just, this is a really great example of what happens when your frequency resonance rises. Okay. So I have a client who is from, so her mother, before she passed away, was from a very wealthy family. Okay. Her mother marries a stepfather. Okay. At the mother's death 10 years ago, the stepfather steals the inheritance from the kids. Okay? Steals the inheritance for the kids. So this woman, who's my client, is like, okay, well, I'm never going to get this money, which is, I mean, there's a lot of stuff around that, obviously.
Mhm.
But she's like, okay, so I'm just going to work really hard to provide for myself, like the rest of the human population, and just do that. So off she went and started work and doing her own thing. Okay. So this goes on for 10 years. And sometimes she would get gifts from him, and sometimes she wouldn't, but it wouldn't be very much, right? So she just expects this to continue. All right. She comes with us to our Scotland retreat that we just gave with like 50 people in Scotland. And her resonance totally jumps in this retreat. Okay, just like everyone else in this retreat, but her resonance totally jumps. Now, was she thinking about her stepfather or anything else? No. She just knew she was in this retreat. She was called to it. She had this experience. She comes home. She's she comes home, and within, I think, a week and a half of being home, she gets an email from the attorney who manages the trust of her mother's estate that her stepfather controls and says, you are getting a huge disbursement, like not just you, but you and your siblings are getting a huge disbursement of a very large sum of money. She doesn't need to work. Like she's like, assuming that I don't buy a Lamborghini every day and like crash and burn it, I'm never going to have to work for the rest of my life. She didn't know even really how much was in the trust account because she'd given up on it, right? She's like, whatever, I'm never going to see the thing. So I don't really care how much is in it because I'm never going to see it. But now she's about to, like, seriously, she is now living a totally different life. She's like just quit her job. She's going to move away from where she lives. She's thinking about how can I start to contribute more to society in a way that inspires me. But literally, before she went on that retreat, it wasn't possible. Like in her mind, she wasn't like, oh, gee, that's possible. After retreat, totally different timeline. So that's an example that's really extreme. Now, I have another, like so many stories of like people who, for example, who, this one woman that I work with, she really struggled with relationship. And she's like an awesome human being. And actually, she's a former alcoholic as well, actually. And she would enter into relationships with men where the men were either emotionally absent or abusive. Okay. And all of her girlfriends would be like, girl, what are you doing? Right? Like this guy is a jerk. And she would do like everything for them. She would like plan their holidays. She would get gifts for their mothers. Like, she would walk their dogs and make them dinner. Like she would do the whole thing, and she was very successful in running her own business and doing like a whole bunch of stuff. But with guys, disaster.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when she broke up with her ex, she was like, okay, that's it. I'm done. Okay, celibate. Celibate. I can't handle it anymore. Okay, done with men. And she decided, okay, I'm just going to clean up my own stuff because I keep being with these same kind of guys. So she does frequency work to clear up her own stuff. She's like, I don't really care if I'm ever in a relationship. I just need to stop the cycle because I don't really feel that good about myself. And I kind of feel like a loser because I always end up with this kind of relationship. Okay, fast forward about 6 months. And she's like, okay, well, I'm going to try dating again because I feel different just to see like what's changed. All right. So her friends get her on 2 dating apps, right? And within a very short period of time, she has 2 dates, 24 hours apart. First guy number 1. She's like, whoa, this guy is a guy I would have like totally fallen for in the past. But this time I could see all of his crap and I could see how I totally would have fallen for that. But like now I see all of his patterns. I'm not interested in that anymore. So like maybe we'll be friends and maybe we won't, but I'm not interested in that guy. So that in itself, she's like, yeah, because she didn't fall for like, same kind of guy. Right. Guy number 2, date number 2. It's coffee, right? Because it's always coffee.
No alcohol
Okay?
anymore.
So,
That's right.
yeah, exactly. Hot beverage in a public place in case you need to like get the hell out of there. So anyway, there she is. We're at the coffee house. Or actually, she's not even drinking coffee. I think she's drinking like herbal tea. So anyway, there she is. And she's like, I couldn't believe it. This is the type of guy I would never have been attracted to before. Never in a million years. Like physically, who he was, whatever. But we ended up talking for like 2 to 3 hours. And get this. So, and the wonderful thing is when she approached this date, she was like, I am not going to be attached to this. I'm just going to like be really present and see what it's like with this guy and see if I can just stay present with him. And she did. And then within a week of their coffee date, they'd gone on 2 other dates. 2 weeks within that, they've gone camping. Within a couple of months, they've gone to Europe together. And like a year later, they're like married. And now she literally, when I've had sessions with her, and she stops having them because she doesn't really need them anymore. She literally says to me, wake up in the morning and I pinch myself because I look at my life and I'm like, I've got this man that I absolutely adore. And it's not about marriage, Gina. What it is she's like, and this man loves me for me. That would have never happened before because she couldn't receive love. You know what I mean? Like she was always the one running around doing stuff, trying to be like prove that she was worthy. But she was like, no, he just loves me for me and I don't have to do anything. He just wants to make me happy. And she was like, that to me was like the icing on the cake because it's like this woman has gone from feeling non-worthy of love to having this man who loves and adore her and is able to receive it. And of course she loves him and does things for him. But do you see what I'm saying? It's such like a
Yeah.
hugely vast shift. And anyway, so many stories, Gina, of people who are doing
Wow.
amazing things. Yeah.
That is beautiful. I love stories, and especially stories like that. It kind of reminded me of my story too. Just briefly, I'll just share with you that I was not looking for love after after my sobriety, but I was hoping for a family unit eventually, even though I had
Yeah.
already kids before. And so I remember I was going to church at this time. I was just checking it out because I wanted to get close to God. And I was
Yeah.
always putting in the prayer box a family unit, but Karen, I was thinking 10 years, 20 years from now, right? No, within the same year, I found my husband.
Wow, that's
And but this
awesome.
is where I was like, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. But I was like, I'm gonna go with it and just, it's happening now. And it was beautiful because he had as a son who's my other son's close to in age or like a year and a half apart. They're
Oh,
so close. And I also have a
that's so
16-year
awesome.
old. And so it's beautiful blended family now. And I'm just so grateful every day. I'm
Oh,
like,
that's
wow.
awesome.
So it reminded me of my story a little bit.
Yes,
That's so
she's the
cool.
same too. She's totally the same because she's always wanted kids. And when she met him, she was like in almost her mid 40s. So she's like starting to get to the point where she can't have kids anymore. And she's like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I can have them. And she's like, I really want them, but I don't think I can anymore. And he has a son. And when they met, I mean, the child was like 8 and she gets
Mhm.
to be a mom now. You know, I mean, like she's not his mother, right? But she gets to like
Care for
be in
somebody.
her care for somebody, like have a child,
Right.
And so I feel like that's so awesome.
Oh, I love that. Oh, yes. Now you've inspired our listeners, and I know they want to connect with you right away. Can you please share your website and even the offering that you want to go ahead and give to our audience?
Sure. So you can find me at sphericalluminosity.com. That's sphericalluminosity.com with 2 L's. You can also, like Gina's mentioned, we have our own podcast. It's over 200 episodes. And after each episode, I give a group frequency calibration. So you can get access to the work for free. So you'd asked at the very beginning, Gina, like, how do you get rid of those distortion patterns? Listen, like, it's funny to me, a lot of people want change, but if you give them a tool, it's surprising to me how many people don't pick up that tool, right?
Mhm. Right.
For the change.
Yes.
So we give the tool. Now, I don't know if you guys are all going to pick it up, but it's there for you. And so, anyway, the podcast is there. You can find it on our website. And you also, for your listeners, we have a free Quiet Your Mind meditation because right now, I don't know if you noticed this, but it's kind of chaotic out there.
It is, huh? That's why I've been a hermit.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people do. And there's so much to worry about, and people are depressed and they're anxious and they're in despair and they're like, oh my God, like, are we all blow up from like World War III? There's a lot to worry about right now.
Right.
And so this meditation really is like there to help you to like come back to yourself, to come back into your center, to like just find that just a space where you can be still and you can drop away from all these things in your head which can drive you nuts. So if you go to quietingyourmind.com, and I think you have the link in
Oh,
your
yeah.
description, yeah, it will be there for your listeners for free.
Yes, everything will be in the show notes for you all. But yes, thank you so much, Karen. Is there any last words or thoughts you'd like to share?
Yeah. So, what I'd like to share is that even though it can sometimes feel that you're alone and it can sometimes feel like you're not enough, the thing is, you are such magnificent brilliance. And I mean this because I can see it on frequency level. And so many people get caught up in like, I need to be 5 pounds lighter. I need to be achieving more. I'm not doing enough. It's not about the doing. You are inherently brilliant. And the thing is, you can become even more so and live the brilliance of life. So don't let anyone tell you that you have to do this, that, and the other. It's just to be more perfect. It's not about perfection. You are human. You are meant to be imperfect. To remember, like, the brilliance within you, the divine that animates you, because that's the thing that when it starts to shine, everything in life becomes so much more magical.
Oh, that was beautiful. Wow. I'm gonna write that one down. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, Karen. It's been such an honor to have you on my show today.
Thank you so much for having me.